Hi, this is Mr. West, and today we're doing a Khan Academy tutorial on positive and negative intervals. This was requested by the Chatta family. Thank you so much for the request, and if you have your own requests, make sure to leave a comment with the specific worksheet or exercise you need some help with. With this Khan Academy, this is actually a very commonly misconceived and kind of confused topic, and I'm going to tell you why. So we're just supposed to select the interval where h of x is less than 0, and a lot of students get confused as what is h of x and how do I find it on the graph. So first thing we need to talk about, I got a couple things written here. I want you to look over here. It says right here y equals h of x, and that's true. So here, if we're talking about our y's and our y coordinates, technically we can write that as a function of x. So anytime you see like h of x or f of x, that just means as a function of x. It's the same thing as y. X gets its own designation. So h of x and f of x or g of x, no matter what, it's never going to be representing x. X kind of gets its own designation, whereas y is often expressed as a function of x. So how do we interpret it? Well, if we see that h of x is bigger than 0, okay, so now I'm looking over here on my screen. So h of x is bigger than 0. What does that mean? Well, that means all the places where y is bigger than 0. Where is y bigger than 0? Well, y is bigger than 0 when it's equal to like 1, 2. This coordinate right here could be like 3, 2. Well, guess what? Y is bigger than 0 right there. It's a positive number, so it's bigger than 0. It's bigger here and here and here. It's greater than 0. So anywhere above the x-axis in the positive like y territory, that's where h of x is greater than 0. And the exact opposite is true. So if you're looking at a point like, for example, down here, that'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, negative 5. Notice how h of x, or y, so that's our y coordinate, is less than 0. So anywhere below the x-axis, the function of x is below 0. Okay, so we need to identify where in this graph right here is h of x beneath 0. So we're looking for beneath the x-axis. Didn't mean to get rid of that. Don't know where it went. Don't know how to, oh, there we go. So I'm looking for beneath the x-axis. And what I like to do is I'm just going to highlight right here. Okay, so see that I highlighted all those spots on the graph where it's less than 0. So now we need to decide what are the intervals. That means we know these are less than 0. The y values are less than 0, but what are the x values, the intervals? So x is between which numbers, okay, and there's a couple of them here to choose from, where y is equal to 0. So what values is x between left and right? Okay, so I'm looking at my x-axis here, and it looks like a little bit less than negative 2 and a little bit greater than negative 1. That's one of the values. So we're just going to go down here, and we're going to look at the values and see which ones match up. This says only one answer, so only one is true. Okay, so let's just look at A. A says between negative 3.5 and negative 2.5. So I have a lot written on the screen. Let's get rid of it. Okay, so let's just get rid of all this to clean this up. All right, that's good enough. And I keep erasing. All right, so that's good enough. Sorry if it drives you nuts that I have some of this. A lot of my students can't stand it when I leave stuff there. That should make you feel better. Okay, so I'm looking at between negative 3.5 and negative 2.5 for x. So I'm looking here, negative 3.5 is right here, and negative 2.5 is right there. So if you look at this interval that it gives us, notice how it's positive, okay? How do I know it's positive? Because the graph is above the x-axis. So those y values, those h of x values, we don't need this one anymore, are greater than 0. So this one's out. A is not a choice that we can use. Between negative 2 and negative 1. So here's negative 2, and here's negative 1. What I do is I just kind of like draw down or up until I get to the graph. And I see that the graph is, in fact, below the x-axis in that point. So I know it's going to be B, but let's just check C just to double check. So 2.5, 3.5. 2.5 is about here, okay, and 3.5 is about here. And you can see that this is also above 0 there. So B is our option, and we're going to check it, and we're going to move on. Okay, next up, choose the interval where f is positive. Okay, so f is, well, I don't know why it says, doesn't say f of x. That's strange. Okay, anyway, so we're going to look for the interval where f is positive, and we're going to look down here, and we see that we have x values. Should say f of x, but that's okay. And we're going to look for anywhere it's above the x-axis. Okay, so it looks like there's only one really interval here. Well, there's a couple. We could have these extremes. But right here, we have an interval between these values. So when x equals, looks like negative 1.7 and then maybe positive 1.5. So between these two values, we know it's positive. And that's one of them. Okay, so let's take a look. We have between negative 4 and negative 2 listed. So let's take a look at where negative 4 and negative 2 are. Negative 4, negative 2. Okay, so look at here. The graph's down here between those 2 points. Clearly negative, so this one's out. We want it to be positive. Between negative 1 and positive 1, take a look. This one's definitely solid. Okay, this is above the x-axis. The y values are positive, so B is going to be our choice. Just take a look at C. You can see between 2 and 4, it is beneath the x-axis, so that's not a good one. We're going to move on. Select the interval where g is negative. Okay, so take a look. G, we're just going to go through the options here. You can kind of see where it is. Look at where x equals 1 on the graph right here, and then all this way it's negative. There's also over here where it's negative, so these values, okay, but we're just going to look at the ones they give us because it's multiple choice. So between 0 and 1, that one is good, okay? So between 0 and 1, that's going to be our answer. If you look at between 2 and 3, that's above the x-axis. 3 and 4, that's above the x-axis. So 0 and 1, I'm just going to show you just in case. So between 0 and 1, that's right here. I meant to choose a different color, but right there. So you see that between 0 and 1, if we went all the way down, that's kind of the deal, or all the way up. But we see that it's here between that interval. So that green is like the interval that we're looking at, and then this red is where the graph actually is, and you can see that it's in the negative values, okay? So that's why that's our selection. Let's move on. We have one more question, and where it's positive. So let's take a look at our choices. I'm going to use that same method I did in the previous problem. Hopefully you guys like that. Negative 4 to negative 3. So let's take a look at that. So negative 4 to negative 3. So I'm actually going to go yellow. So here's our interval that we're looking at between negative 4 and negative 3. We see that it is in the negative territory, okay? That's beneath the x-axis, so it's in the negative territory for h of x. So that doesn't work. Okay, so that first one is a no-go. What about between negative 2 and 0? Let's take a look at that one. Negative 2 and 0, that is this bigger interval, and it's still negative. Take a look. It's still negative here beneath the x-axis. I should erase this one. Okay, so let's move on to the choice 3, which we know what it's going to be by process of elimination, but it says between positive 2 and positive 3. Oh, I don't know if I talked about this, but this is just talking about the x values between these 2 points. So this means we can't equal to, but it can be negative like 1.9, negative 1.5. Oh, sorry, not negatives. That means it can be like 2.1. There we go. 2.2, 2.5, all the way up to like 2.9999, okay? All the places between that. So that's what that means. X can be any of those values between 2 and 3. Okay, just, I don't know if I clarified that earlier, but that's what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so between 2 and 3, it's this tiny interval here, and you can clearly see that it's in the positive territory, which is above the x-axis. So it is choice C, and we're done. So that's all there was to it. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, make sure to like and subscribe. Maybe share this channel with those that you know might need help with math. Small channel, still trying to grow, so I'd appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Wes Explains Best.